Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you may be watching from, and welcome to AMN Healthcare International's live show, Onwards and Upwards, where we discuss everything a global healthcare worker needs to know about living and working in the United States. I'm your host, Danielle Friedman, and very excited to be here with you all this morning on Valentine's Day. We have our special once-a-month immigration show with our experts who are coming on to answer your questions. So they're going to give us an update on the Visa Bulletin, take all of your questions, give us some insight. So it's going to be a great show. If you are watching along, please put in the comments where you are watching from. I see we already have some people putting in the comments. Hi, Bainon from the UK. We have Bacalon from Saudi Arabia. Hello to Bacalon. We have Matthews from Zambia. And I see we've already got some questions in the chat. So I am excited for today. Lots of questions, lots of comments. So please go ahead, put your questions. We will be taking them live. And before we get started, I did just want to say a very special happy Valentine's Day to everybody around the world. Valentine's Day is the day of love, which is why I'm wearing my beautiful red shirt, reddish pink. And I wanted to hear from all of you. Why do you love being a healthcare worker? Why do you love being a nurse, a med tech, a doctor, whatever you might be as you're watching along? While I might not be a nurse or a med tech or a doctor, I did want to share a quick little snippet of why I love nurses. So about 2 years ago, I gave birth to my first child. I was very blessed and lucky to have a very easy delivery, but I will never forget Grandma Judy. That's what she called herself. She was a nurse throughout my birthing process, and I will never forget her holding my hand. I was very anxious, and I'm sure a lot of you who are watching can understand and relate to this story. I was a first-time mom, and Grandma Judy held my hand, and she looked in my eyes. She told me it's going to go ba-da, ba-da, ba-da. And it did go ba-da, ba-da, ba-da. And she said, in a couple hours, you're going to hold your baby, and it's going to be one of the best moments of your life. She gave me a hug. She held my hand throughout the whole process. And a few hours later, I did have my beautiful baby. But I will never forget Grandma Judy. She made an imprint on my life, and that is why I love her. That's why I love nurses. I love what you all do. So thank you for what you all do. Please put in the chat why you love being a nurse. We'd love to know. And before we get started bringing out our immigration experts, I did want to remind everybody here at AMN Healthcare International, we are the only company to have both staffing and direct hire opportunities across the whole United States. So let's bring up that map. It's a map of the whole country, and it's all outlined to show you that we have opportunities everywhere. And we are consistently hiring for direct hire, for staffing. So if you are interested, please apply on our website. The link is amnhealthcare.com/international. We're going to drop it into the comments. You can click on it. Our recruiters are waiting, and they are excited to help you with staffing and direct hire opportunities. All right, everybody, let's get started with our immigration Q&A without further ado. Good morning, Mike, and good morning, John. How are you both doing?
Good. How are you, Danielle?
I am good. John, it's nice to see a new face. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you.
I'll make sure to give you all of the special, unique, random kind of questions that we all kind of go, Don't worry, your face is like, uh-oh, what did I get myself into? I'll give those to Mike.
Same hairstyle though, John. Yeah. So, so good. Well, I'm glad it was you. So.
Well, thank you both for joining us today. We are very excited to get your insights. We're going to take questions from the chat. So we appreciate your time. Before we get started, why don't we do a little bit of introductions? We'll have our newbie go first. John, can you introduce yourself, please?
Sure. Yeah. So my name is John Dawson, and I am one of the partners at the law firm Musso Holt. And I've been practicing immigration law for about 14 years now. And I guess just a little bit of personal background. My family also went through the immigration process when I was pretty young. When I was 5 years old, my family came over from England through my dad's work permit, and then we eventually got permanent residence and became a U.S. citizen. So I think that was in part what motivated me to enter this field.
Interesting. John, we've been on a few email exchanges, but I did not know that about you. That's very interesting. All right. Well, we are excited to hear your insights as we go through the show. Thank you for being here. Mike, you're up.
Yes. My name's Mike Hammond. I'm an immigration attorney in Cincinnati. When Chris is on the call, I'm the youngest, but I'm older than John. So I did take that role as the oldest one today. But I've been practicing immigration law for a little over 30 years and doing healthcare work for about 25 of those.
Very nice. Okay. Well, we are very lucky to have both of you here to share your insights. I can see the chat is already going off with lots and lots of questions. Before we jump into all of these questions, let's start with the question that everybody's thinking. Let's get an update on what happened or didn't happen with the March Visa Bulletin. Mike, you want to take this one?
Sure. So basically, the category that most individuals on this call are concerned about, which is the EB3, either Filipino category or the rest of the world, did not move. Now, as we've talked, for the last several years, they've been doing the movement on the final action date chart on a more quarterly basis. That did not happen with some of the other categories. EB2 across the board moved. EB3 moved for India and China. But we remain hopeful that if the quarterly holds true, that we will get some movement in April. Keep in mind that our prediction going back to October is that at some point during this fiscal year, which runs from October 1st until September 30th of 2025, that the final action date chart will move forward up to meet the date per filing chart, which is March. So March of 2023. So by that estimate, assuming we're right in that, we've still got at least 3 more months of movement in this fiscal year. So, but bottom line, nothing happened.
Okay, so just to make sure that I understand you, key points. Unfortunately, March Visa Bulletin, there was no movement for the Philippines and the rest of world category, which is what most people on this call are interested in. And you think that there will be 3 months movement before October?
Yes.
That's the prediction. Okay. Well, fingers crossed. John, anything to add to that? Any predictions? I know that's a hot question when we come to these sessions.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, I think as Mike mentioned, they've been doing the quarterly updates, so we should hopefully see a little bit of forward movement in April. But then beyond that, I mean, once we get the next quarter into July, we're already getting in the latter part of the fiscal year when a lot of times, the Department of State might push it back or even eventually make it unavailable right at the end of the fiscal year. So that seems to be the trend we've been seeing, is just that, we started off maybe the fiscal year looking at a 2-year retrogression, and over time, that's just increasing, and we might eventually see a 3-year retrogression.
Okay, thank you, John. So I know for a lot of people who are watching, they might feel quite discouraged, because I think we were all expecting, okay, it's going to be potentially a little bit of movement coming into the March Visa Bulletin. What advice would you have for those people who are watching and are feeling like, ugh, it didn't move? Mike, I'll start with you.
Yeah, I mean, I'd say it's fair to feel a little discouraged and a little disappointed. I mean, I think that's natural. I think we all feel that when we look at a monthly bulletin and see absolutely no progress whatsoever. I think that the things you have to keep in mind is that retrogression is not anything new. It's been around for a long time. We've had retrogression much worse than this. But right now we're still in that 2.5 year mark. But as John mentioned, it looks like it might be, getting worse. It certainly doesn't appear to be getting any better. And that is simply a function of the supply and demand. I would, steps I would do now is certainly take care of the things you can control, whether that's getting your visa screen, passing your English exam, making sure that you're getting bedside experience. I think some practical things as a result of how long retrogression is now is you need to make sure you're speaking to your case manager about any overseas assignments, overseas extensions. There might be some opportunities, particularly if you're right now in a country where you're not able to get bedside, but you are able to move somewhere else where you could get some actual bedside experience. That's always attractive and always beneficial. And just reach out to your case manager to see how much time do you think reasonably you have. So I think it can affect some practical day-to-day things that in the long term can be positive. Keep in mind, retrogression does not mean you're not going to get here. It's affecting the time as to when you can get here.
Good advice, Mike. I think, for a lot of you who might be watching and might be feeling a little bit discouraged, like, oh man, maybe it's going to get worse before it gets better. Who knows? We're all just guessing here. I think Mike had some good advice there. And I think the key takeaways, if you're watching, number one, do what you can control. Pass your English, get that experience, whether that means going to another country to get that bedside experience. Pass your NCLEX. If you haven't started, that's your golden ticket to getting started. And I think overall, most important, get filed, get your priority date, get in line. That's going to be the number one thing that you're going to want to do to get this process started. Retrogression, in my eyes, is just a delay. It just means it's going to take a little bit longer to get you here. But at AMN, we have a lot of experience dealing with retrogression. We know how to handle it, and we're going to get you here eventually. It just might take a little bit longer than we originally thought. John, any advice to add?
Yeah, I mean, I think you guys hit it for the most part. The one variable I think I've seen in my cases is whether or not the fee bill gets issued, or how far out from being current. So I guess that's just another thing to keep an eye on, or something you can do that you can have some control over if that fee bill is issued, is to go ahead and get your police clearances, get all your civil docs in, and get documentarily qualified. Because one thing I've seen on cases is that it's not just priority dates that tends to be the focus, but a lot of these embassies and consulates get so backlogged that sometimes it's not simply having a current priority date. You're going to immediately get an interview. It will be based on, well, who got documentarily qualified first. A lot of times that's how the embassies and consulates prioritize the cases to schedule for interview. So that's one area that you could maybe help your case at the end of the process if you get the NVC stuff taken care of.
Okay, good advice. A nice little extra ad. Thank you, John. Good advice. So let's turn to the chat, because I see there are lots of people watching, putting questions in the chat. I see we have Araba from Ghana. Hello, Araba. We have Maki from Lesotho. We have Ebatol from Qatar. Thank you all for watching. Please put your questions in the chat. We're going to be going through them. So Carrie Ann is asking, can you switch from direct hire to contract? Would it make a difference to the priority date? My priority date is June 2023. Mike, you want to go ahead and take this one?
Sure. So I think what you're referencing by contract is the staffing arm of AMN. And you can do that legally. It's a new filing because it's a different petitioner. The hospital is no longer the petitioner, the staffing company is. So it would be a new I-140 that's filed. However, you retain your priority date. and so your spot in the queue is retained. So if you are interested in moving from the hospital that originally sponsored you to the staffing arm, you'll want to reach out to your case manager and discuss that with them. But it is certainly possible.
Okay, great. Well, there you go. Got a good answer. Okay, so Occupil has a question. I'm a Canadian citizen and I recently completed my BSN program from a Canadian institution. I plan to write my NCLEX by the end of May of 2025. How long does it typically take to complete the TN process? John, you want to go ahead and take this one?
Yeah, so the TN process is actually quite fast. You know, as a Canadian citizen, and you know, the registered nurse position is one of the positions that's eligible for that. And the great thing about the TN is that you can apply directly at the border with a letter employment offer from your U.S. sponsor. And you know, you have your documentation with your nursing degree, your proof of NCLEX, and you know, you would need to get a visa screen, which should be pretty straightforward, given that you have the Canadian degree and should waive the English language requirement. So yeah, once you have the NCLEX, you know, make sure you get the visa screen, and then you can reach out to U.S. employers to get that going.
And if this person has all of that information, how long do you think it might take to get the TN visa?
It could take a matter of days. I mean, once if you have an employer who's on board and wants to hire you and puts together the offer letter for you to take, it's just a question of when you want to travel at that point.
Great. So for Occupil, it can be a pretty quick process for the TN, is what I'm hearing.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah. Okay. So if you are, and correct me if I'm wrong, Mike and John, keep me honest, if you are a Mexican citizen or a Canadian citizen, you're eligible for the TN visa, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. The only variance for the Mexican citizen is that they would have to have an appointment at a U.S. consulate in Mexico to get that TN visa. So it'd be a little bit longer process, but still, you know, relatively fast.
Okay. So if you are a Canadian or Mexican citizen and you're watching and you're thinking you might want to come to the US, although the process might differ a little bit, it's generally a pretty quick process. And at AMN, we would be very happy to help you find an employer, whether that's direct hire or staffing. So please apply on our website, amnhealthcare.com/international, if you are looking for a TN visa. That can be a pretty quick process for you. Okay, so let's take another question. We got lots of questions today. Everybody is excited to get their free information from our experts. So we have a question from Ani Timfon. She says, hello from Nigeria. Hello, we're so happy to have you here today. I want to ask about what's going on with I-140 approvals. I was filed for I-140. It's been 14 months and no approval. Okay, so Mike, let's turn to you for this one.
Yeah, so massive slowdown and massive inconsistency is what we're seeing with I-140s. About 2 weeks ago, we tried to put in service requests for I-140s that had been pending over 12 months. And we were advised that those are all still within normal processing times. So normal processing time has moved quickly forward. So we're seeing some cases still at the 16, 17-month mark that have yet to be approved. The inconsistency part comes in because we're seeing some cases at around the 8-month mark that have already been approved. So that can be extremely frustrating, particularly if your case is in one spot and your friend's is in another spot. One of the things to keep in mind is that your priority date is established when your I-140 is filed, not when it's approved. So other than it being frustrating and being a little bit of the unknown, you're not being harmed as far as the timing of your case. We are not encouraging clients to premium process at this point in time because of the retrogression of the line is still longer than it's taking for the I-140 process. And we've had I've not heard any official explanation from the USCIS as to why that has happened, and USCIS has cut off communication with most trade groups like AILA, the American Immigration Lawyers Association, which used to have a fairly robust way to communicate with them on monthly calls to look at issues like this, and that has all been eliminated. So we're all in the dark a little bit right now, unfortunately.
Okay, thank you, Mike. Good information. So, Adi Tompon, if you're watching, I think just to sum it up, it might be frustrating, but while waiting might be frustrating, which we understand, it does not harm you because your priority date is the date that you filed. So that's the important date. That's what we are talking about here with the Visa Bulletin. If you're going to get to move forward in the process, your priority date is established when you filed. So you've already got that date. So that's good news. Okay, so let's see. We got lots of questions. So John, I'm going to turn to you. Michael is asking, I'm a Kenyan US RN. I've been current since the start of this fiscal year with a priority date of October 2022, documentarily qualified at September of 2024. No updates from the embassy so far. Kindly advise. Any thoughts for Michael?
Yeah, so this touches on what I was talking about earlier, because I've seen this with a number of cases too, where a variety of embassies, consulates across the world, where we've got an individual whose priority date is current, they're documentarily completed NVC, so nothing left for them to do except for having the interview scheduled, and we just wait and wait and wait month after month after month. One way that, and so again, what I said earlier was the embassies are going to base it not just on the priority date, but also within the people who are current. When did you become documentarily complete? And the earlier that you were documentarily complete, the earlier the interview should be scheduled. But that, I think this just goes to show that that the embassies and consulates still have a limited bandwidth, even with retrogression, preventing so many cases from getting finalized, they're still not able to process enough interviews for the cases that are current to kind of keep up with that. So one thing you can do, which I've done on a number of cases, unfortunately, I wish this information was more readily available, but I know through NVC, Department of State has confirmed that if your petitioner submits a congressional inquiry with their local congressperson, then and sort of giving the details of your case, we should get a response back from the Department of State indicating what documentarily complete date is currently being scheduled for interviews. And so I've done that on several cases, and then that just helps both the sponsor and the foreign national get a little bit more visibility into what the timeline might be, for when the interview might be scheduled. That it's not just the priority being current, but they might come back and this is just an example. They might say, oh, we're currently processing interviews for people who were documentarily complete June 2024 or earlier, let's say. And so you could kind of have a little bit of an idea, okay, maybe it'll be roughly a few months more, and then I should be getting my interview. So so that's what's going on there with your situation.
I learned something new every time I do these. Okay, that's very interesting. So there was a lot to unpack there. I want to make sure we're all understanding. So let's take a quick step back. John, can you explain what does documentarily qualified or documentarily complete mean?
So that is referring to the NVC process, and it means that everything is complete with the NVC, the National Visa Center. So the fee bills have been paid. So there's a fee bill for not just the nurse, but for every dependent who's with you of $345. There's an online application for the nurse and each dependent called the DS-260 that's been an online application that's completed and submitted for each individual. And then also that every individual's civil document, so these are, the birth certificate, the passport copy, the marriage certificate if you're married, and police clearances from any country that you've lived in, as an adult, that all of those civil documents have also been sent to the National Visa Center. And after all of that, the NVC has reviewed it and determined that there are no missing documents. And at the end of that, the National Visa Center will send out an email with a little Word document that essentially says, okay, effective this date, your application is complete and you are now in the queue waiting for your particular embassy or consulate in the country that you live to schedule you for an interview.
Okay, good information. So to kind of sum it up, at the NVC, it's kind of like the secretary. They're getting all your paperwork in line. And when all your paperwork is in line, that's when you're documentarily qualified and you're kind of parked there before you go into your interview. Does that kind of sum it up?
Yeah.
All right. Okay. So we have a graphic that I think might be helpful to just kind of understand these 5 steps and where retrogression is really affecting everything. So you have all of that. Step 1, here are the 5 steps. And this is really simplified version. Of course, there are steps 1A, B, steps 2, 1A, B, little Romanette 1, lots of steps that go underneath everything. But if you're following along and you're thinking, where does retrogression really actually affect and change my process? So step 1 is the pre-filing. This is what you can do. This is what Mike was talking about when he said, control what you can control. Everything that you can get done before your immigrant visa. So the big one, passing your NCLEX. If you're watching for the first time and you're thinking, how am I going to get started? Pass your NCLEX. That's going to be your big one. Step 2 is filing of the immigrant petition. This is when your priority date is established. Step 3 is the National Visa Center. So this is what we were just talking about. It's like the secretary that organizes all of your paperwork. You get all your fee bills done, all of that kind of stuff. And then you are what John has called documentarily qualified. So at step 3, this is where you park. This is where we are waiting to move to steps 4 and 5, which are the steps that have been affected by retrogression. It doesn't change the steps. It just delays your getting to the steps a little bit. So that's just a little bit of a graphic to kind of understand how the process is being affected. But like we keep saying, you will get here eventually. It's just a delay and it's just a little bit of a waiting at the last few steps. Mike or John, you have anything to add to that graphic? Did I sum it up pretty good?
Nope, I think it's good.
All right. Okay, good. So let's take some more questions. I see we have lots and lots of questions in the chat. So let's see. We have a question from Petty. Petty says, I'm in the US on a 5-year visitor's visa. I passed my NCLEX last year. I do not have an employer at the moment. Do I qualify for adjustment of status? Mike, you want to go ahead and take this one?
Yeah. So the visa that you're referencing, a 5-year visa, does not mean that you can stay in the U.S. for 5 years as a visitor. When you entered the U.S., depending on where you entered at, if you flew in, you were given access to what they call an I-94 card record. That will tell you your last date that you can stay in the U.S. It is generally 6 months. Sometimes it's shorter than that, but generally 6 months. You can access that information online. There was probably a sheet that was passed out to you on the plane that would let you have that data. So you're going to be limited to the U.S. to 6 months. in order to file a 485, you have to have a current priority date under the date for filing chart, which right now is March of 2023. So since you don't have a prior employer, you are not going to be eligible for adjustment of status. You want to be consistent with the terms of your visitor's visa, leave when you're supposed to leave. If you ultimately then want to be sponsored, you're going to reach out to AMN, and they can try to connect you with their staffing arm or with one of their facilities so that they can get an I-140 for you, and then you can wait in the queue like everyone else, and you would be processed overseas.
All right. Well, Petty, there you go. Some good information. You know, as I do these immigration Q&As with our lovely experts once a month, I sometimes start to feel like maybe I'm becoming a little bit of an immigration attorney. I'm learning all the lingo. There's a lot of lingo. It is hard out there. If you are watching along and you're thinking there are acronyms for acronyms and words for words and so many things, my head sometimes feels like I'm going to explode. I do have some advice for you. We have guidebooks, free guidebooks on our website, all about adjustment of status, all about the TN visa, all about the EB3. And those documents go through detail of what the process looks like, what you can expect. So we're going to drop the link in the chat of our guidebooks. And we have a little graphic of what they look like. So you can see there, it's all about immigration to the United States. We also have one on the 50 states, so you can learn a little bit more about where you're going or where you want to go. And you can download these for free. So you can understand all of this lingo, make sense of it all. Because sometimes, I don't know about you guys who are watching at home, but my head sometimes feels like it's going to explode. So this is a good way to really understand the process and make it easy for yourselves. Okay, so I see we have a question from Len. Len is watching from Saudi Arabia. Hello to Len. My priority date is June of 2023. Given the current Visa Bulletin, which is December 1st, 2022, changing status from EB3 to EB2 would be a good idea? ? Any advice would be appreciated. All right, Len. Well, we're going to give you some advice on changing status and what our experts think about that. John, I'm going to turn to you for this one. And maybe you can explain what an EB2 is.
Sure. Yeah. So when we say EB2 or EB3, we're really just referring to employment-based is what that stands for. So this is referring to green cards that are sponsored, that require an employer to sponsor you, as opposed to a family-based green card. So for a marriage or a parent of a U.S. citizen, let's say. So there's different employment-based categories, and largely what we've been talking about so far today has been the third category, the EB3, which these different categories are determined by what the requirements are for the position. So, for EB3, that is a position that requires at least 2 years of training or work experience. So in the U.S., for registered nurses, you need at least an associate's degree, which is 2 years of education to complete that. So an EB2 category is a sort of a higher qualification. Not as many people are going to qualify for that, because that is a position that has a minimum requirement of at least a master's degree, or it requires a bachelor's degree and at least 5 years of work experience. So that's something that the position requires, which the foreign national would also have to meet that requirement to be eligible for the EB2. So in many instances, the EB2 has a slightly shorter wait time than the EB3. So it's understandable why someone, if possible, would like to pursue that option. But that would be something that you would need to discuss with your employer, because that could be that would be an increased cost for the employer. And depending, I'm not sure if we're talking about a nursing position or if we're talking about another position, but typically general nursing positions are not going to qualify for an EB2 to begin with. But certainly there are other healthcare positions out there that could qualify for an EB2. But it would just come down to your employer if they're willing to, if they think that slightly faster processing time is going to be worth the added expense that they would have to go through to get you that into that EB2 category.
All right. Okay. Thank you, John. So Len, if you're following along, I think big takeaway, talk to your employer and talk to your attorney before you make any big decisions. As we suggest for everybody who's watching along for these shows, talk to the experts. They know what they're doing. They can help to advise you. So I see we have quite a few questions that are in the same vein. So Segun says, can we change our priority date? Mike, do you have any advice for Segun? Can they change their priority date? Is there anything that they can do to expedite their priority date?
Well, the category you're in is dependent upon your country of birth. However, if you have a spouse who was born in a different country and their priority date is more advantageous, then you can use your spouse's category. That can sometimes, it doesn't change your priority date, but it changes the column that you pay attention to. As far as changing your priority date, you cannot go and get an earlier priority date unless you had a prior I-140. So if you had an I-140 approved from a agency, a hospital, a staffing company back several years ago, and then you did not move forward, or they didn't move forward, whatever the situation is, and you're filing now with a new hospital, new agency, new staffing company, you can what we call recapture that old priority date. As long as you have the documentation and as long as that petition was not previously revoked for fraud or misrepresentation, then that priority date can be retained. So there are ways to recapture old priority dates, but other than that, there's not really a change of priority date. And there's no way to expedite and get your priority date to move faster. It's simply a spot in line, first in, first out kind of rule.
Okay, so there you go, Segun. Some good information for you on potentially some alternatives, but probably for most people, it's just going to be waited out because you're going to get here eventually. You're going to get here. It's just a delay. As we brought up that 5 steps, you're still going to go through those 5 steps. You may just have to wait a little bit longer at that step 4 before you proceed forward. So we have a question from Paulina. Paulina says, I passed the NCLEX. Congrats to you, Paulina. That's very exciting. Confirmed all the documents in the CGFNS, but my English is no good. You advised me to contact you. There's no point in waiting until I pass my PTE. So I think generally, can we file somebody who hasn't passed their English yet? Can they get in line? John, can you take this one?
Sure, yes. It is possible to start that first step of the immigration process and file the I-140 petition, even though you have not passed the English exam. The main qualification is something that you've met. You mentioned that you've recently passed NCLEX. So that's the number one thing that qualifies you for the I-140 in addition to your nursing degree. So certainly be in touch with AMN about that, because I know they have a lot of great programs for helping candidates like yourself improve your English exam scores and pass that, because ultimately you will need to do that to get the visa screen, which you'll need later on in the process.
You teed me up perfectly, John. If you are watching and you haven't passed your English exam yet, as John said, here at AMN, we offer free programs to help you pass that English exam. And we've had lots and lots of success stories with candidates who have not been able to pass, and with our help, they were able to pass. So to sum it up, Paulina, we suggest you apply to us because we can get you filed. You have that NCLEX. You can apply at amnhealthcare.com/international. We can help you decide, are you going to go the staffing route? Are you going to go the direct hire route? And then we can help you do that English while you are waiting, during that waiting period until you become current. So that is good news and something special about AMN, something that we do as a gift to give back to our nurses. So hopefully that's something that you can take advantage of. All right, so lots of questions. I hope we can get to all of them before time. So we have a question from Betty. So Mike, I'm going to turn to you. Betty says, my priority date is the 15th of December, 2022. Getting close, Betty. That's exciting. Is it okay to relocate to another country as I wait to be current? Mike, any advice there?
Well, first of all, you need to speak to your case manager, and there may be circumstances where they would say that's a good idea. From a purely immigration perspective, it is very likely that you're going to be current within the next couple of months. So that would seem to be against a long relocation. It is difficult to change consulates, and that certainly would delay things if you're going to be somewhere long term. But again, I don't know your circumstances as far as have you not had bedside in the last couple of years, and maybe this would give you a bedside opportunity, and maybe your case manager says delaying your immigration until you have some bedside experience would be better. I don't know those circumstances. So reach out to your case manager and speak to them directly about it. But I would say you're, from an immigration perspective, you should be current fairly quickly.
All right, well, that's good news for you. We will cross our fingers for you. So I know we have already given our predictions for what's going to happen for the rest of this fiscal year, but there are a lot of questions about predictions. Rianne says, what is your prediction for the coming fiscal year, 2025? What is the date of cutoff, or what prevailing wage or priority date is to be current? So let's just give our viewers a quick update one more time. John, I'll turn to you. What are our predictions for the upcoming year?
Yeah, so I think just the way this has been going, the last, well, really, I guess it was almost 2 years ago when we first ended that interim period where we had, no retrogression during COVID. It's continued to get longer. So I think we're going to see that push up to 2.5, maybe even to 3 years, if we're talking about the next fiscal year, starting later in October of this year.
All right. Well, there you go. I see lots and lots of questions about predictions as I'm scrolling through. So there you go. We also discussed this more in detail towards the beginning of our show. So you can go back and see both Mike and John's predictions for what kind of movement we're going to see. So I see we have a question from Aya. Aya says, I've been filed for an EB3 visa for a particular agency. Can I file for an H-1B visa with another agency? Mike, you want to go ahead and take this one?
First of all, most RN positions in the U.S. do not qualify for an H-1B. In order to qualify for an H-1B, the hospital has to demonstrate that BSN is the standard for that particular role. And as John mentioned earlier, the standard in all 50 states to get a license is an associate's degree. And so that is generally what hospitals follow. There are, however, some situations where an H-1B is possible. And in a situation like that, you can certainly do an H-1B. However, one of the things you have to keep in mind, in your question, you suppose that you were filed by one agency or one staffing company and are now looking to move to someone else. So you're going to want to consider whether you have any contractual obligations that may prevent you from moving to another facility or may have some sort of financial repercussions. Keep in mind, contracts can often be things that can be held against you, not in an immigration context, but in a civil context. So you're going to want to be careful about that and make sure you're clear on what that actually means. Also, if you are thinking about coming in on the H-1B, and then as soon as your priority date becomes current, flipping to the hospital that's already sponsored you for the EB-3, I think most hospitals would find that behavior to be borderline fraudulent, and it would be very suspect in allowing you to do that. They would consider that to be a breach of ethics, and so I would not expect that would be the path. If you are talking about the same hospital, keep in mind the standards used for your EB-3 are going to be different than the standards for your H-1B. So you might be able to retain the old priority date, but you would need a new I-140, a new prevailing wage and a new I-140 in order to go under the position that was used for your H-1B. So they are two different types of filings. So what you're asking is possible, but has a lot of hurdles.
Okay, thank you, Mike. So just to explain a little bit further, what is an H-1B? Is that an option for our viewers who are watching? John, you want to go ahead and take this one?
Sure, yeah. So an H-1B is a temporary work permit. So it's different. Up until now, we've been talking about permanent residence status or green cards, which essentially have no expiration. And H-1B is a temporary status, just like someone who comes in a visitor. It's another category that someone who's going to be in the U.S. temporarily can have. And it's valid for up to 3 years at a time. And really the main idea behind an H-1B, to qualify for that, obviously you need an employer to sponsor you. And the position that the employer is sponsoring you for, as Mike mentioned, has to be one that requires at least a bachelor's degree in a specific field or related set of fields to be eligible for the H-1B. So that's why with registered nurses, for example, most of the time you're not going to be eligible for an H-1B, and not because I know a lot of the individuals on this call who are nurses most likely have a bachelor's degree or higher in nursing. So it's not just what qualification you have, but what the position requires. And so, essentially that is if there's a position that qualifies for an H-1B and you meet those eligibility requirements, you have at least the bachelor's degree in nursing. That's something that a potential employer sponsor could file for you, and that H-1B can essentially be a bridge, if you will, to the green card. You can first have the H-1B while you're waiting for that green card priority date to become current. And so if that's the case, then you could theoretically, go directly from an H-1B to a permanent resident. And but as Mike mentioned, it's very challenging for registered nurses to qualify for that. So there's not a whole lot of there's not a large number of employers right now who are looking to sponsor nurses for this position.
Good words of advice, John. And I just want to touch on that. There are not too many H-1B positions available because, as John said, it's not just about if you qualify, it's if the healthcare facility qualifies as well. But there are still some. So if this is something that is interesting to you, something that you may qualify, feel free to apply on our website, amnhealthcare.com/international. and our recruiters can help you figure out if that might be an option for you. Okay, so I know we're coming up on time. We still got lots of questions. Let's try to get to as many as we can. So I see Constantia says, is it possible that the new government could decrease the amount of green cards for the EB3? I think generally maybe there's a little bit of apprehension about the new government coming in, the new president, President Trump. Do you have any thoughts or words of advice for anybody who's watching from around the world? I'll ask both of you this question. We'll start with you, Mike.
Yeah, so the number of green cards is set by statute. So it is not anything the president controls. So I think that is highly unlikely that he would try to make any change to that. Generally speaking, during his first term, he took no actions that would negatively impact healthcare workers. Most of the actions that they took negatively impacted H-1Bs in the IT space and in other areas, research and things like that, but not pure healthcare. So if we assume that he's going to follow the same path this second term, which may or may not be true, but that we should probably see no effect, positive or negative. Now, there is a lot of legislative hope that we can try to get something passed that would provide some relief. But again, it's tricky in this political climate. But I do not see anything particularly negative happening in the healthcare space.
Okay, well, that's good news for anybody who's watching and might be feeling a little bit apprehensive. John, anything to add to that?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I guess just thinking back to the first term, the only thing that I would add, I think overall that's correct, that the healthcare immigration is impacted too heavily. The only impact I would see, maybe a potential negative impact that we saw the first go round, is, on initial filing. So these I-140 applications that we've talked about, I could see there being a higher rate of what's called a request for evidence, where the government asks for an additional information, maybe about the company sponsoring, or about the position, or about the foreign nationals' qualifications. We could see an increased rate of that, or perhaps slightly higher scrutiny at the embassies. This sort of heavier extreme vetting that language that's been thrown around, I think, in some of the executive orders. But overall, as Mike mentioned, the big picture, the framework for these cases and the number of visas that are available each year, we still see those being issued, and there's still a great need in the U.S. For these healthcare workers. So, for the most part, I think we're going to continue to see that moving forward.
Okay, well, there you go. So Constantia, I think not something to be worried about. The number of these visas is set by statute. And I think at the end of the day, continue on with your plans. If we could all control the politics of everything, I think we would have a very different situation. Unfortunately, we can't. So all that we can control is ourselves and what we are doing. So we're going to try to take a couple more questions. So Mike, Deborah has a question. She says, my daughter, who is turning 21 in July, will she be able to accompany me should she turn 21 while waiting for my interview to be scheduled? So I guess she's worried about her daughter aging out. What more advice do you have, Deborah?
The age out rules are fairly complex, and they're very specific to you individually. So you're going to want to reach out to the attorney that's handling your case to get some specific answers. But just so people know, the general rule is child needs to be under 21 when the green card is issued. So having a I-140 filed does not, lock into place your child's birth date. There are a lot of rules. For example, one of them is that The amount of time your I-140 is pending is added to your child's birth date to achieve what they call CSPA age out date. So if your daughter turns 21 on July 1st and your I-140 was pending for 12 months, then your daughter doesn't really turn 21 in the eyes of the USCIS until July 1st, 2026. There are some other rules as to when things are locked in and when they're not. But they're not. Reach out to your attorney or your case manager for some guidance on that.
All right, Deborah. Well, there you go. You can reach out to your attorney or your case manager for a little bit of guidance to see if she will still qualify. But our fingers are crossed for you and your daughter. So we have time, I think, for one or two more questions. We have a question. It's a follow-up question. So I'm going to go to you, John. It's about the H-1Bs. So Constantia wants to know, is it a bad idea to move to the United States and work with an H-1B? Meanwhile, the priority dates will be current. I'm from Chile and we have this chance, but we don't know if it's a good idea. Maybe in 3 years, the process will be current, but we could live and work legally and then return to Chile when the priority date is current. Please try to answer me. So we're going to give you some advice, Constantia.
Yeah. So what Constantia's referencing is a special category of H-1B. It's called an H-1B1, and it's just available for individuals from Chile and Singapore. There's a certain annual allotment, and it is essentially largely identical to the regular H-1B work permit. So again, if you are a nurse, the same we need to do the same inquiry, right, to see that the position is one that truly requires a bachelor's degree. And if so, I think it's definitely worth pursuing. In the background, you can have that I-140. Again, we don't know how long retrogression is going to stretch out for, but if you have that path available to you for the H-1B1 and an employer that has a position that's eligible and wants to sponsor you, I definitely think that's worth pursuing.
All right. Well, there you go, Constantia, some advice from our experts. So we are almost at the top of the hour. I am going to let our experts go. Thank you both so much for being here today. Thank you for sharing all of your advice once a month, for coming on and giving your time. It's great to see you, Mike, and great to meet you, John. Hopefully we'll have you on more of our shows. But happy Valentine's Day to you both, and thank you both for joining.
Thanks, Danielle.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Have a good day.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
So I did just want to say, I see a lot of comments in the chat about being frustrated, about being upset. I hear you. I see you. I'm also frustrated. I'm also upset. I was also hoping for movement. But I want to tell you now to take a moment and think big picture. Don't think about today. Don't think about tomorrow. Think about yourself in a couple of years. Think about where you want to be in a couple of years. We put a quote in here: you'll never reach your dream if you don't take the first step in that direction. It's true. Things day to day, it might seem frustrating. It might seem upsetting, which I understand. If I wish that I could wave a magic wand and get you all here sooner, I wish I could. But what you can do to get yourself on this journey is start the process. Apply on our website, get your priority dates, get in line, and you're going to get here. It's just a matter of a little bit of extra time. I keep reminding myself retrogression is just a delay. That's what I keep saying in my head. It's just a delay. We're going to get you all here. It just might take a little bit of time. I like to think back to this quote from Tom Hanks. So let's pull up the quote now because I think it's a really good one. If it wasn't hard, everyone would do it. It's the hard that makes it great. So I'm also an immigrant. I've been through this process, although it looked a little bit different for me and my family. And I can tell you on the other end, it was a tough process. It was a hard process, but it was a worth it process. So I hope for all of you that you will be able to go through this process if that's what you desire. And I know taking that first step can be hard, but taking that first step gets you on the journey. So take that first step. Apply on our website, amnhealthcare.com/international, and we can help get you started. Get that priority date, get in line. Well, thank you all for joining us today. We're going to bring up our schedule for the rest of the upcoming weeks and months. So let's see what we have upcoming. So we have our upcoming shows. We have February 18th, the LaFora Talk Show. We're going to be talking about state of the industry. And we have a new season on our Nursing in America podcast, the RN Journey to the USA. We'd also love to hear from you if you have any suggestions on shows that you would like to see us talk about, anything that you would like to learn. 2 weeks from now, or a little less than 2 weeks, we're going to have our Career Week Marathon. Every day, we're going to be bringing on potential employers. We're going to be sharing recruitment tips. So make sure to check that out, February 24th to the 28th, every morning, same time, 7 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. It's going to be our Career Week Marathon, and we are so, so excited for that. So thank you all for joining us today. Happy Valentine's Day to you if you are celebrating around the world. And onwards and upwards, everybody. We will see you in America soon.